Hello friends, you're with the Lonesome Gamer, and today I'm gonna play Erosion by Sierra Madre Games, designed by John Douglas. It's a small card game, and well, it's about the geological processes of erosion, basically. And it's well, kind of a rarity. There are no videos about this game. It's a 2 to 5 player game, so no solitaire option, but it's also fun to play this in a, well, kind of a split personality way. So yeah, just want to give you some impression how this plays, and maybe not go too much into detail here. Okay, so the game is set. And I just realized one thing: if you do a game like this on camera, nobody except maybe for the designer will correct you if you make a mistake. That's quite different to things like Mage Knight or something like that. Okay, so basically we're doing a 4-player game here, and these are the mountains of the 4 players here. So they're made of cards, and these cards represent rock layers. And as you can see here, on the top of this mountain we have simple conglomerate, then we got schist, shale, granite, sandstone, and another layer of granite. Each card represents a layer of the height of 500 meters. So this mountain is 3,000 meters, and at the beginning all mountains are 3,000 meters tall. The goal of the game is to score points. Well, basically there are a few ways to score points. One is to have a tall unweathered mountain. For each unweathered layer of rock, you get a point. And by the way, you count your points at the end of an era. And if you play a 4-player game, we play 2 eras. That means that we basically play twice through the deck. And after each era, we count our points, shuffle all the cards together except for the mountains, and then we start a second era, count the points again, and who has the most at the very end wins the game. So as I said, for each layer of rock that is not weathered, you get a point. In addition, there will be a discard pile here. That is your river delta. And for each rock in your river delta, you get 2 points. Finally, you got here on the left, you can see that here, for example, or yeah, up here, same thing. These are fossils. So if at the end of an era these fossils are in a weathered rock layer, then you get 3 points for each of these fossils. But this is pretty hard to do. You will see why later. In addition, with the expansion, we got these 4 mountain cards here. Now you can try to basically become one of these mountains, and that gives you points. From 3 points, the Vinson Massif, to 8 points, Mount Everest. You can become one of these mountains simply by reaching the necessary height, 4,000 to 5,000 meters, or here 7,000 to 8,000 meters, and the top 2 layers have to match these layers that are shown here. So that's also not that easy, but as soon as you manage to achieve that goal, you get that card, and that gives you the points. And you will always stay that mountain then. It cannot change. For example, if you, I don't know, if you get for some reason Mount Kilimanjaro, and then after a while you end up with the top rocks of limestone and shale, and the height also matches, then you don't become Mount Everest. You can only become one mountain per game. In addition, there are some challenge cards here, and they give you some additional goals, or one additional goal. But these cards are dealt randomly during the second era. So, and they only apply, they only give you points at the very end of the game if you accomplish your goals until then. Okay, so now how does this work? Well, main goal is obviously to make your mountain grow and to lower the mountains of the other players. To do this, you can use these cards here. And the cards have basically two meanings. Up here, you got that rock layer, and down here, you got some, well, hard to tell. Let's call it an event card or something like that. So there are cards which represent weathering processes. They are marked with a WX, and for example, this one allows you to weather 3 rocks if the mountain is 4,000 meters or higher. So right now we could not play this because all our mountains are only 3,000 meters. Now let's see what we could do. This maybe here. This also allows you to do a weathering process, oxidation, and you can weather these type of stones. Now let's see on some of these mountains here. Doesn't look that great though. Well, here for example we have basalt. We could weather that. But then the next one would be conglomerate, and with oxidation we cannot weather that. So that means we could only weather the top card, and that's not so useful actually. Here we got schist. We could also weather that, but not the granite. And you always go from top to bottom. And if you come to a point where you cannot go on weathering, where you cannot continue weathering, then the lower layers, they are shielded. And therefore, it doesn't help us that we can, for example, weather shale with this card, because the shale here is shielded by the granite. So we can only also weather the top layer here. In addition, we have this cavern formation option, which is pretty cool because it makes it more likely to get some fossils. So therefore, we probably want to have this in our own mountain. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to pass the first player here. He's simply going to pass. That's also something you can do. If every player passes, the game is over, by the way. So I hope that's not going to happen right now at the first turn, but it's very unlikely. Okay, so this is a much better card here, the thermal expansion. Player 2 can play that on the mountain here of player 3, for example. And with that he can weather schist, which is down here, and that's the top layer. Granite, got that here. Shale, conglomerate, another granite, and the only thing he cannot weather is actually the sandstone. So that's a pretty awesome card here. It's pretty destructive. So he's going to play that card that goes here simply on the discard pile of player 2. And then these top 5 cards are weathered. That means now they are simply placed a little bit more on the left, or in this case I'm going to place the lowest card a little bit on the right. So that the mountain still has its the same height, but now it is partly weathered, and now you can actually start with hill slope processes to really erode that mountain. But first you got to weather the rock before you can hill slope it. So what's the good thing now about these weathering processes? Well, it affected 5 cards, so that means that player 2 is now allowed to draw 5 cards, which is pretty awesome. Now up here we have 3 different decks, and on the one hand we have the different processes. These are the weathering processes, the hill slope processes, and the fluvial processes. And there are also the stones, sedimentary stones, igneous stones, and metamorphic stones or rocks. Now there is a draw limit for each deck, and you can see here a 1 and up there another 1, and you simply add the both numbers. They can either be a 1, or if you change that, which can happen through atmospheric processes, then it might be a 0. So you add up the 2 numbers here, and that's the draw limit from that pile. So basically there is a draw limit now of 2 for each pile. So let's draw 2 from this pile, 2 from that pile, and 1 over here. Okay, so that gave us now 5 new cards. That's, as I said, pretty awesome, because now I got that card limit of 6, and every card which goes above 6 has to be played in an uplift action underneath our mountain. So that means the mountain will grow that way. Okay, so I got now 9 cards on my hand, so I'm allowed to play, no, that's not true, I got 10 cards in my hand, so I'm allowed to play 4 cards to uplift my mountain. Now, I'm going to start actually with these 2 cards here. I'm going to start with Basalt and then the Welded Tuff. Why this? Well, as you can see here, Mount Kilimanjaro comes with Basalt and Welded Tuff at the very top. So if we're lucky for some reason and we manage to get rid of all these cards due to erosion processes, which is absolutely possible during the game, and then we end up with these cards at the top and also match the height of the mountain, then we have a chance to become Mount Kilimanjaro, which is definitely cool. And so we start here, and it says flood basalts. If uplifted, trigger 2 atmosphere and unweather all rocks on your mountain. Then weather all unshielded shale, limestone, sandstone on all mountains. Oh, now I see the problem. Uplift this card to the top of your mountain. So I think I'm not going to do that. But we got another basalt here. And that doesn't come with these flood basalt event. So we can simply play this. Underneath goes now the Welded Tuff. Same problem here. Okay, sorry for the mess. You see, this is a little complicated. We're gonna do this the right way now. So we start here now with the welded tuff. And this is a super volcano event. Upon uplift, hill slope all weathered rocks on your mountain. Well, there are no weathered rocks here. Trigger an atmosphere for every 2 rocks hill slope. That won't happen. Uplift this card to the top of your mountain. Okay, so that's what we do now. That means we got to place this card at the top. Usually you place this card, you place the uplifted cards at the bottom, because most of the time, except for volcanoes, mountains grow from the bottom to the top. But in this case it's a little different. And now we're gonna uplift this flat basalt. If uplifted, trigger 2 atmospheres and unweather all rock on your mountain. Then weather all unshielded shale, limestone and sandstone on all mountains. Okay, so first we're going to trigger atmospheres. Now what does that mean? We can choose to change the atmospheric conditions on planet Earth, and well, what we're going to do is we're going to trigger an atmosphere here. So this changes now into an arid age. These are the fluvial processes, or the deck of the fluvial processes, and now we have an arid age. So that means we're not allowed to draw 2 cards anymore, but the draw limit for this deck is now only 1 card. Remember, you can add these 2 numbers together. And then we got to trigger another atmosphere. We could now trigger this again, and then in this way completely stop the drawing of the fluvial processes. But this is something I don't want to do. I'm gonna trigger this one here and make this a hypoxic age. And by the way, we can read these things, which is kind of interesting. During periods of hyperactive erosion, oxygen levels in the atmosphere can drop to 13%, a condition known as hypoxia. Today's levels are 21%. This is hard on animals, and oxidative weathering slows down as well. Okay. So, and again, we have now a lower draw limit from this deck here, and this says orogeny mountain building events interfere with air and ocean currents, often turning the continents into desert and shutting down the erosion cycle. Okay. In addition, which is also kind of cool, you have all these things written here. For example, flood basalt. Sometimes the earth suffers from outbursts of basaltic lava that flood entire subcontinents. The acid rain from these cataclysms increases weathering worldwide. So I'm going to read some of these because it adds a lot to the atmosphere and is quite interesting, I think. Okay, so we're allowed now to place that here. And as you can see, we got now basalt and welded tuff. Oh, and it says, uplift this card to the top of your mountain and weather all unshielded shale, limestone and sandstone on all mountains. But this is nowhere the case. We got here schist, basalt and conglomerate at the very top. So the other layers are then shielded. And, well, then we can actually, we have a good start now here for Mount Kilimanjaro, basalt and welded tuff. Maybe we're already there, I'm not sure. Then I'm going to place down here the limestone and the shale. And let's count now our cards. We're not there. I'm pretty sure about that. It's 5,000 to 6,000 meters. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now that mountain is 5,000 meters high. We need another 2 cards, and then if these top cards would not be eroded, we could grab that card, and that would give us then 5 points. That would be pretty awesome. Just in case now the whole mountain should break down during the game, we have a chance, only a little one. Here we got limestone and shale. And in theory, that gives us the option one day to become Mount Everest. Well, you have to set high goals, huh? Okay, now just to repeat the basic mechanism of this game, we played a card, that one here. In that case it was a card of weathering. It could also be a card of hill slope, and that card affects a number of stones or rock layers on another mountain. Or it could be also my own mountain, by the way. Depending on the number of rock layers you affected, that's the number of cards you can draw. But only until you reach a draw limit from the from the decks here. And then you have your hand cards, and if you are above 6, you're allowed to play the cards that you have more than 6 to uplift your mountain. And that's basically it. Okay, so now I checked the cards of player 3, and I realized I don't have any good weathering cards here to do some damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this one here, which is a hill slope card, and it says creep. So it only works on mountains which are lower than 4,000 meters. And you can play 3 weathered rocks to the river. So the only weathered mountain is my own mountain, but that's cool. I'm going to play this card anyway on my mountain. Now the top cards, the top 3 rocks, go to the river. So what is the river? The river is a, well, common pool of cards where now the weathered cards, the hill slope cards, the eroded cards are going to be placed. And so now by this action, 3 cards or 3 rocks were affected, so that allows us to draw 3 cards from the deck, and I'm not sure. I think I'm simply going to draw 1, 2, 3. And you have to say where you want to draw from at the beginning of your draw phase. So you cannot draw the first card, see what you got, and then draw the second card. That's not allowed. Okay. So that means we should have now 8 cards on our hand, and therefore we can use 2 cards to uplift our mountain again. Okay, now, as you might have realized, the different rock types are here shown in a different size, and that represents the chance that these rock types will be eroded. And the bigger rock types, the ones that are shown in a bigger size, are less likely to be eroded. So the welded tuff and the quartzite are, well, pretty strong, and you can well use them to protect your mountain. And things like shale or, well, I don't know, sandstone or so, they are pretty likely to be eroded. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this quartzite here, kind of protect the lower layers of my mountain, because it's already pretty low and I don't want to lose that completely. And then underneath I'm going to play that granite. And that shows now earthquake fault zone. So if we've seen these events, this one here, the flood basalts, for example, or the supervolcano, which are written in a black letters, and then we got these things here written in red letters, and that means basically that they apply as long as they are part of your mountain. So they are some kind of a special ability of your mountain, if you want to call it that way. So this mountain is now in an earthquake fault zone. Your draw limit for the weathering deck is 2, regardless of atmosphere. So that's pretty good, because usually it would be only 1. The fault lines in the boundaries between continental plates constantly expose fresh, highly reactive rock for weathering. Okay, so we place that down here. And it's important to keep in mind that, I don't know if I said that, at the end of an era, if you count the height of your mountain, the only rock layers that give you points are the unweathered rock layers. That's pretty important. So in this case, it wasn't so bad for him to hill slope the top of his mountain, because it allowed him to uplift some new unweathered layers. And although this mountain is now 500 meters lower than it was before, he would gain 2 more points for this mountain than at the beginning of the turn. Okay, so player 4 realizes, hey, this guy is close to becoming Mount Kilimanjaro, and we definitely don't want this to happen, so we're going to play some sheeting. And with that, we can weather basalt, welded tuff, and sandstone. We cannot weather quartzite, but we can weather the top 3 layers here. And then if the next player can hill slope them, no chance to become Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's a chance we're going to take here. So we're going to play that card. The top 3 rock layers are now weathered, so we place them a little bit here on the side to indicate that. And then I'm allowed to draw 3 cards, and I'm gonna also draw 1 card from every deck, and then I'm allowed to play 2 cards to uplift the mountain. Okay, so my goal is to become the Vinson Massive, and we have here on top quartzite and underneath conglomerate. It's a long way to go there. So this mountain is in an El Nino zone. If uplifted, trigger 1 atmosphere. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is, I don't want too many problems here, so I'm gonna trigger that atmosphere again, so that we don't come into a situation where we're not allowed to draw any cards of that type. This can happen, and this would be a problem for everyone except for this guy in the earthquake fort zone. So it could be his goal, for example, to say, okay, we trigger another atmosphere here, and then we have this hypoxic H, and the only guy who can then do any weathering process in the future is me. Well, not forever. If someone else plays the right card, okay, that's fine. But you know, it can slow down the other players quite a bit. So I play this one, the El Niño zone. Ocean circulation reversals cause periodic warm pools that feed thunderstorms and typhoons. The location of El Niño sites varies with the drifting of the continents. Well, I guess the location of nearly every site varies with the drifting of the continents. And then we have here the conglomerate, which is placed underneath. And that matches here the quartzite and the conglomerate. Fine, so that was basically the first turn then. The only player who didn't do anything was player 1, but that's okay for now. And I think I'm gonna go a little faster now through the next turn before I load this up. Okay, so there goes indeed Mount Kilimanjaro. We got the debris flow here, which can be only played on mountains of a height of 4,000 meters and more. But this mountain is right now about 5,000 meters. And it simply says all weathered rocks to the river. Okay. So these rocks are lost now. These 3 rocks now go into the river. Oh, that's kind of bad luck. And that means the player can draw 3 cards and then uplift his mountain. Okay, we're playing this schist, and we have here granite. So we're actually going here for Mash a Broom. And we have this metamorphic core complex. You may spend your turn to uplift all schist in your hand. Schists are highly metamorphosed rocks that fracture in a wavy pattern. They are exhumed by core complexes that move deep continental crust to the surface. Okay, and then we're going to play the limestone with the cavern formation. This rock layer can be weathered but not hill-sloped, even if shielded. So that's pretty cool, because if this is weathered somewhere in the middle of the mountain, which is possible because you can weather it even if shielded, then this fossil would actually count at the end of the era, because fossils count only in weathered layers. So I think this is basically the most realistic way to get fossils onto the mountain. Most limestones are formed from marine animals and algae that use lime for their shells. In dry climates, limestones are resistant to all types of erosion. Okay, so there we go. Okay, what player 2 does now is something new. He plays a fluvial process, indicated by this F here. And that says braided. Discard exactly 3 rocks to move the same rock types from the river to your delta. Okay, so this card goes now onto the discard pile. And so do these 3 cards that he had in his hand. The shale, the granite, and the sandstone. So these are all discarded. But now he's allowed to take exactly these rock types. So we got here shale, granite, and sandstone. He can now take these rock types from the river and place them into his delta. And the delta is basically a face down discard pile next in the player zone. And remember, these cards, each card in the delta gives him 2 points. So that's pretty awesome. These are worth now 6 points, and these points cannot be destroyed in any way or something. So that was a pretty strong move by him. The only problem is he now has only 2 cards left in his hand, because if you play a Fluvial process, you're not allowed to draw as many cards as were affected by your process. So in this case, he only has 2 cards in his hand, and he might use his next move to simply redraw his cards. Okay, now we've seen all possible processes. First, the weathering. That makes them the cards available for the second, the hill slope process, and this hill slope process brings the cards into the river, and then with a Fluvial process you can bring the cards from the river in your delta. So that's basically the whole cycle that the players play. And the only other actions they have left is either draw cards up to their hand limit or pass. That's it. Okay, so nothing shocking happened. Player 3 played the creep to weather his own mountain, basically, and that allowed him to add a layer of limestone here. Player 3 played the crystallization, to hill slope the mountain, of course, and player 3 played the crystallization to weather here the quartzite and the limestone, and he's now going to play the basalt for the uplift here of his mountain. And we got here an upwelling mantle plume. You may spend your turn to uplift all basalt in your hand. Hotspots in the mantle create volcanic centers. One such hotspot in Hawaii has formed the world's tallest mountain, Mauna Kea, 10 kilometers from abyssal plain to summit. Okay, let's hope for the best here. So, we've done the first 2 turns, and I think it's time to load this up. Basically, players are doing fine. I think this player here, player 2, is doing the best because these 3 cards in his delta, but it's still a long way to go, and pretty sure we're going to see a lot of uplift action in this game. Hope to see you in the next video or on lonesomegamer.com. Bye.